So my name is Garin Vorthmann, and I am co-owner and lobbyist at Colorado Legislative Strategies, independent lobbying firm in Denver where we focus on state legislative activities. I have been lobbying for the oil and gas industry for now 17 years. So it's something that I have seen a lot of ebbs and flows and changes over time. And I was asked to come and talk about, give a brief update on the state of the legislative session where we're at today. So the Colorado Constitution requires that the state legislature meets for no more than 120 days every year. We get started at the beginning of January and end at the beginning of May. So where we're at right now is we have 3 weeks left as of today. And the way I'm getting through it right now is I'm counting it as I have 3 trash days left and then we're done. So we're getting there, we're close. So I thought I'd start off with kind of a little levity on where we're at, and starting off with some famous quotes that we've all heard in the past, or in our lifetime. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Everybody's heard that, right? Rhett Butler, Gone with the Wind. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. This was Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1933 in one of his State of the Union addresses. And finally, today, with the signing of this bill, it is our hope that the oil and gas wars are over. That was Governor Jared Polis signing Senate Bill 19-181 in March of 2019. Well, since 2019, according to the Colorado Chamber of Commerce, there have been over 80 different environmental bills passed through the General Assembly, and then that led to numerous rulemakings. In 2024, this is a list of 12 bills that have been introduced and are currently, most of them are currently still in the process. This does not include bills that impact the industry, but are not direct impacts, such as bills regarding endangered species, rare plants and vertebrates. There's 2 different bills regarding regulation of dredge and fill activities, and many, many more. So these are just the bills that have a really direct impact to the oil and gas industry. I thought I'd run very quickly through these and then see if we have some time for Q&A at the end. So last year in the 2023 legislative session, there was a bill, House Bill 23-1294, that was a very broad-based bill dealing with ozone regulation. It had lots of moving parts. It was very, very complicated and very controversial. At the end of the session, kind of the biggest thing that came out of it was 2 things. It directed the ECMC to do a cumulative impacts rulemaking, and then it also created an interim committee to talk about ozone issues. That interim committee started meeting late last summer and moved into the fall. They did not have the ability to introduce legislation directly from the interim committee, which is a bit different than most interim committees. But what they could do is talk about legislation that they might want to introduce in 2024. So out of that process came 3 different bills. House Bill 1330 is the first one. And so I will admit, I did the cardinal sin of, with my slide, that's a lot of little words. I get it, it's hard to read. I didn't really mean for you guys to read it all. In part because all these bills are super complicated, they have a lot of different things in them, and it was impossible to narrow it down to just 1 or 2 key parts. So I wanted you to kind of have a visual of just how extensive some of these bills are. But basically what House Bill 1330 does is for oil and gas operations, this is as the bill was introduced. So every bill that I have up there is, the summary is as it was introduced, and there have been changes made to all of them. What it does is with oil and gas operations, it creates a one-source construction permit by aggregating emissions, including pre-production emissions. It changes the timing of the permitting process between ECMC and CDPHE, and added new requirements for minor sources. The bill passed out of the first committee in March, and then it passed out of the House Finance Committee just this week on Monday. It has been amended to address the general construction permit concerns from industries outside of the oil and gas industry, as well as exempted utilities from the bill. This bill has a very high fiscal note, and we'll get to why that's an issue at the end. But the fiscal note said it has a $2.5 million impact with a requirement of 19 new FTEs being hired. The department differential from CDPHE said that it was actually going to cost them $24.3 million to implement, plus 187 FTE. That's a distinct difference than what the fiscal note originally said, and that's something that the legislature is grappling with right now. So Senate Bill 165 is the second bill that came out of the Ozone Committee discussions. What this bill does is it created emission standards for in-use off-road diesel-fueled fleets, regulates indirect sources and requires new rules to be promulgated in 2025, and prohibits production during the ozone season, which they defined as May through September, beginning of May to the end of September. Finally, the bill required a study to be done on vehicle miles traveled, creating targets to reduce the number of vehicle miles traveled in the non-attainment area. This bill passed out of the House or Senate Transportation and Energy Committee in mid-March with some amendments to take out the VMT language, change the indirect sources rulemaking scope, and redefine the ozone season as just from the beginning of June to the end of August. Gee, thanks. This one also has a department differential to the fiscal note, but it's a little bit lower, but it does have a fiscal impact that the state is trying to grapple, or the General Assembly is trying to grapple with right now. This bill is waiting to be heard in Senate Finance. Finally, the last bill of the Ozone Committee bills is Senate Bill 166. This one is very broad and impacts many more industries than just oil and gas, but it creates a repeat violer category that if you have violated your emissions 5 times in 3 years, increases mandatory fines, increases civil penalties, including creating a private right of action where citizens can sue for violations, and increase local government fines. It also said that if the operator was deemed a repeat violator, the operator must affirmatively reduce emissions. Amendments were added in the Senate Transportation and Energy Committee in mid-March that clarified that paperwork violations don't count towards the repeat violator category. Violations must be related to emission limits, exceedance, and 5 separate violations rather than 1 incident with the same stationary source. So it's a little bit narrow in scope. The fiscal note. The fiscal note says it's going to cost the state $18.8 million and 93 FTEs. The department differential said this is actually going to cost $80 million with 550 FTEs. That's big. And so this bill is also waiting for a hearing in Senate Finance. And I think a big part of the reason we haven't seen 165 and 166 heard in Senate Finance Committee yet is because they're still trying to figure out that fiscal impact. 159. This is a bill that is deceptive in its title, but basically what it did was banned oil and gas production in Colorado, starting in 2030. It severely limited the number of wells permits that could be granted between now and 2030, and then threw some language in there about some just transition and trying to provide some training for workers when they couldn't have any oil and gas production, and also tied liability for the well all the way back to if there was a problem with the well, it would have tied the liability all the way back to the original owner of the well if necessary. This bill was heard in mid-March. It was 9 hours of testimony. More than 200 people signed up to testify. This bill died in Senate Agriculture Committee. So that was a huge win for the industry. The industry showed up and said that we matter. House Bill 1338 is a bill about cumulative impacts and environmental justice. What it does is creates the Office of Environmental Justice at CDPHE and allows them, or gives them the authority to do 2 ESHA environmental impact analysis. ESHA is Environmental Equity and Cumulative Impact Analysis, which does a cumulative impact analysis for a specific area. It increases local government authority over permitting, air quality permitting, creates a petroleum refinery expert at CDPHE, and creates a APCD rapid response team. Amendments were added in the committee in March to remove the local government language and allows the department to accept gifts, grants, and donations to help pay for the ESHA analysis, but that money cannot come from industry sources. This bill did pass out of the Energy and Environment Committee in March and was waiting for House Appropriations hearing. House Bill 1357 is a pipeline safety bill. What it does is require PUC mapping of oil and gas pipelines on a scale of 1 to 6,000, requires PUC rules to be promulgated by the end of 2024 to deal with advanced leak detection, reform, establish timelines for repairs, and create monthly inspections for road and railroad crossings. It requires removal of unused pipelines within a certain amount of time, creates a PUC website for pipeline safety data, and increases penalties to $500,000 per violation. And that would be adjusted to inflation. This bill is going to be voted on in the Energy Committee on Thursday. We do know that there are amendments coming to change the leak detection language to be a little less prescriptive, moves more of the specifics of the bill to rulemaking for further conversation, gives the PUC more time to develop a website, and probably adds some more specific language on type R lines. House Bill 1359. This is a spill reporting bill, and what it does is it requires an operator to report to the ECMC and the Department of Local Affairs within 24 hours of discovery a spill that happened on their site. It creates a hazardous chemical notification website and a committee to help develop that website that would provide educational materials related to hazardous chemicals. And then it also requires county notifications to all citizens if there was a spill on an oil and gas site. It also has penalties of up to $1,000 per day if the operator did not report the spill. This bill passed the Energy Committee on March 27th and is waiting to have its hearing in the House Appropriations Committee. Amendments were added to eliminate county requirements for the public notification to all citizens, increase the number of chemicals that must be reported to CDPHE, DOLA, and ECMC. House Bill 1367. This is really good timing considering one of the panels just right before me talked about stripper wells. What House Bill 1367 does is repeal severance tax exemption for stripper wells. It means that they will have to pay both severance tax and ad valorem tax. And I don't want to repeat what was said in the presentation earlier about stripper wells, but after that, you know how big of an impact that will have on communities if these wells are uneconomical to drill or to keep in production anymore. So there's a big impact to local governments and special districts. This also brings in about estimated $20 million of severance tax revenue to the state. And while that's important is because when severance tax revenue comes into the state, it's money that hits the Tabor cap. It goes up against the Tabor cap. Once the state budget hits that Tabor cap, any overages have to be returned to the taxpayers. The General Assembly really dislikes that. And so the money that's coming in is making them get closer and closer to that Tabor cap, which means more and more refunds are going out to the taxpayers. And so this bill has been waiting for its Appropriations Committee because they can't figure out how to deal with that Tabor impact. House Bill 1370. This is one that, based on the keynote speaker right before lunch, or during lunch, this is where they're attacking the demand side of oil and gas and natural gas. What it does is allows for a certain number of gas planning priority communities to be created and approved by the PUC. And what these gas planning priority communities can do is vote, or they can move to decommission current gas distribution system in their area or avoid expanding systems for new developments. So it would shut off natural gas to consumers. This one passed out of House Energy and Environment Committee last week. House Bill 1339. disproportionately impact a community of air pollution. This one undoes a rulemaking that the CDPHE did last fall. This is much broader than just the oil and gas industry. It impacts a lot of other industries with greenhouse gas emissions. And so this one, we expect a lot of amendments. It hasn't had its first committee yet. It starts, or that committee is on Thursday. Okay, Senate Bill 185 is a forced pooling bill. What this one does is it would require an affidavit be signed with 45% of the mineral interest to be pooled, 60-day protest period for mineral rights owners if they don't want to be pooled, and limits production if the mineral rights owner rejects a pooling order until ECMC enters a pool order. It also, very importantly, says that local government mineral rights cannot be pooled if the local government has rejected the pooling offer. Amendments were added in committee to avoid frivolous lawsuit and protests and remove the rulemaking associated with that. That bill passed on third reading or last vote in the Senate today and moves over to the House. And then finally, House Bill 1346. This is a bill about CCUS. Again, the previous panel talked a lot about that. The reason I put this one on the list is because this bill in committee last week added a definition of cumulative impacts. So that rulemaking that was required by House Bill 1294 was supposed to start this month. The bill was amended to move that rulemaking back, and then it put a definition of cumulative impacts into state statute. This would impact carbon capture and storage, and would require the cumulative impacts of all facilities under ECMC. So that's the CCUS wells as well as oil and gas wells that are regulated by ECMC. That bill passed third reading in the House this week and moves over to the Senate. Okay, questions? That was a lot. You guys are too easy. Okay.
I'm just going to yell it out. What is your feeling on 1367? Where do you think it's going to go? I got a couple more, but what's before that?
1367, okay. I think it has a lot of momentum behind it, but I also think that Tabor impact is a big deal, and that is something that the legislature does not want to bring in a lot more revenues to hit that Tabor cap, because that then reduces how much money they have to spend on their legislation. So they are struggling to try to figure that out right now. Crystal ball.
And I was walking in when you first got up there, but you are a lobbyist for this.
Yes.
Are you? This is going to impact a lot of smaller counties, big time. Like Yuba County, for example. I'm from Yuba County, and we've got a couple operators in Yuba County. All of our wells are stripper wells. And 10 years ago, our revenue, our tax revenue was over 65% from oil and gas. And right now it's sitting at about 4% because of all the regulations that have come out, all the issues that have come out in the state of Colorado. And this is going to kill stripper clubs. It really is. And it's going to kill the revenue that we have right now. You know, we're not going to see much of this severance tax from a local standpoint. It's all going to go to the state because, you know, I think we all know why they're wanting this is because they're out of money. But it's all going to go there. It's going to put a huge impact on our operators, which are having troubles anyway, you know, with everything that's going on. It's going to make it easier for them to walk away.
So what I would say is if this bill passes the House, it will have to go through at least one hearing in the Senate where testimony will be allowed. Work with Colorado Oil and Gas Association. They can alert everybody to when that bill is being heard in committee. Show up and make your voices heard. Talk to your fire districts. Talk to your school districts. Talk to your county governments. let them know that this is happening and have them run the numbers about what that impact's going to be. My guess is if it passes out of the House, it'll go to the Senate Finance Committee. They talk numbers. They will want to hear about that impact. The fiscal note will not show the impact to that level of government. We have to voice that ourselves. And so if that bill gets another shot at testimony, we need people to show up and explain the impacts.
Okay. And one of the other things is some of the operators that we've had in Yuma County, because of so many of these regulations, not even including this, they've actually just walked away from their wells. They just walked away from them. And because of everything that they can hand to them or need to do. And so this is just going to make all of that even worse. So I hope they're hearing you. I hope they're hearing the rest of us. You know, it's like any other bill, they're probably not, but I will be there to testify.
And I will give a shout out to ECMC. I know that they're looking at this bill for the potential impacts to the orphan well fund and what that could do to what obligations the state has. And so they are looking at it from that standpoint, because I think you're right. I think this could lead to many more wells potentially being put on that list. I think I saw some hands. Okay.
2 questions. Wendell Coons, Delta County. You had one bill up there, a quality bill, you said had a potential of 500 new FTEs and an $80 million impact. Could you put that slide back up? Second question is, what is the cumulative impact of 2024's bills on, what's the total financial impact and full-time equivalent that this state would have to hire?
That's a good question, and we'll have to pull those numbers together. But this is the bill that I talked about, Senate Bill 166, that has that $80 million impact and would increase the need for 550 new FTEs. And that's through CDPHE and I think the Department of Law. So. Yes.
One more. So based on these bills and I guess the limited amount of time that's left in the legislative session, do you think any of these will die on the calendar? And then also due to sort of the financial priorities of the legislature, how many of these might die because their fiscal notes are maybe not priorities for other members of the Senate or House?
Back to my crystal ball. I don't think that all of these will pass. I am not comfortable in saying which ones, because at this point, everything's fair game, and most of these bills they have a long ways to go through the process, but they have a lot of support behind them. They also have a lot of opposition in front of them. House Bill 1330, Senate Bill 165, and Senate Bill 166, you've noticed that all of their titles are very similar. I think this was done on purpose to be able to take pieces of, if one of the bills would die in committee or on the floor, they could take that language from that bill or pieces of that bill and put them in one of those other bills. I expect that that's going to happen. I don't know which bill, I don't know which pieces of the bills, but I do think that we're going to see some consolidation of some concepts out of these bills and put into one of them. I think the fiscal issues facing the stripper well bill is significant, so that is something that's working in our favor. Same with some of the bills that impact the broader community, like House Bill 1339 that we're going to hear tomorrow. That has a big fiscal impact as well, and so I think the fiscal issues, it's going to be something that they're going to have to address. Any more questions? All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate the time. And right on time.